Welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury.
Hey everyone, welcome into an all-new episode of Resilience and Resolve with attorney Lance Drury. I am your host, Mike Leon. For more than 30 years, Lance has been helping individuals and small business owners regain control when the IRS problems feel a little overwhelming. And in today's episode, we're talking about a situation that surprises a lot of people when the IRS suddenly starts collecting again after months, maybe even years of apparent silence. Lance is going to explain all that in just a second, because you got to understand why that happens and what it means and how we can help people respond calmly instead of reacting in panic. Lance, it's good to see you as always. I'm sure a lot of people bring this to you and they assume that the IRS has gone quiet, so the case has gone away. A terrible assumption. But in reality, why does the collection activity sometimes stop and then restart?
Well, there's a couple reasons. The primary one is they're a bureaucracy. Things fall through the cracks. There's 26 million delinquent taxpayers. The IRS doesn't have enough personnel to handle all the cases. And so invariably, things are going to fall through the cracks and they can reach out and then you don't hear from them for a while. This government shutdown is a prime example. They left, they went, and things aren't going to go back to square one on the first day they come back. It takes some time. In fact, once they're shut down, they never get back to where they were before the shutdown because heaven forbid they work any overtime to try to catch up. And so, that can happen a lot. Now, the other thing is in an audit, if they go quiet, a lot of that means they've sent it to criminal investigation. So that can happen during an audit, and then they may come out back months and months later after they've done an investigation. Maybe it's criminal investigation themselves that are coming after you. So those are the two most prevalent reasons why things go quiet, and then all of a sudden they come back to you. I have people that haven't filed a return for 20 years. They never hear from the IRS. And then you hear people and they file the return, and right after they file the return, they get one of those nasty letters from the IRS. Right. So you got to understand there's no rhyme nor reason to what they do. They're a bureaucracy. Mike, the only thing is screwed up is the IRS is the Postal Service.
Right. I've heard that before, Lance. Can I ask you though on that front? I know you mentioned it a little bit about people that have filed right away, then they hear, but do changes in income, compliance status, like you mentioned about the filings, does that affect at all? I know you said that there really is no rhyme or reason, but does that affect at all whether a quiet case can come back to life?
Well, I'll tell you where the change in income makes a big difference. If you set up what's called a partial pay installment agreement, the IRS has the right to come back after 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, and to see if you now have the ability to pay more. And sometimes they'll just send you out a letter, fairly friendly for the IRS, that says, hey, we just saw that you filed your return. You made a lot more money. We want to see if you should still be placed in currently non-collectible status, or if you should still be partial pay, or if you can pay us more. And so that happens a lot. But the other times, they'll just send out one of those nasty letters saying, hey, we're coming after you without any prior notice just because you had a huge jump in your income and you were on a partial pay. Now, if you're a full pay, that's not going to happen because they're going to get every last dime anyway. But when you set up a partial pay installment agreement, you're agreeing not to pay the full amount, but they have the right to review it if there's changes in your economic status. The good news is that works both ways. If your income decreases, you have the right to call the IRS and to renegotiate a settlement on your ability to now pay that your income has decreased.
Lance, it funnels into a good follow-up, which is I mentioned in the intro why you shouldn't ignore, the dead silence or even these notices. So can you kind of explain to people what happens when someone ignores these notices that you mentioned because they assumed, hey, I haven't heard from them for forever, so the problem must be resolved?
Well, and here's the classic is, the IRS has to send a sequence of 5 letters before they can levy. And the taxpayer, if I did a different kind of law, I wouldn't know this either. But some of those earlier letters imply that they can levy you, but they can't because it doesn't contain your appeal rights so that you can stop the levy pending a full hearing. And so what happens is people get these letters, nothing happens. People get these letters, nothing happens. Then they get the final notice of intent to levy, which means if you don't do anything in 30 days, in 45 days, the IRS is going to levy you potentially. And so people ignore those letters because they think, oh, they've threatened me before. They didn't do anything. They're just blowing smoke. So I'm going to ignore this one. Bad idea, because what they can do is they can wipe out your bank account. They can take 15% of your Social Security. But if they put it in your bank account, which they do, it's a direct debit, they can take 100% of it. They can take 90% of your take home pay, and they can take 100% of your 1099s. So do not ignore those letters, because I got to tell you, I've seen people. I had a guy once in St. Louis several years ago, and when he came into my office, he looked like he was half dead. So when he sat down, I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I've been living in my car for more than a year because the IRS is leaving me with $200 a month to live on." And of course, at that point, he didn't have the ability to hire me or anybody else. And he simply ignored the letters that were sent to him. And so that's what happens when you ignore those letters. So, unless you're trying to run out the clock on collections, because the IRS doesn't have forever to collect the tax, it's generally a bad idea to ignore those letters from the IRS.
Lance, do you have another example you can kind of give? You just gave that last client example, well, was potentially a client, but another situation where maybe somebody understood the reason for why the IRS restarted their case and it kind of helped the way the case shifted?
Well, again, I think it would probably be one of those letters where they were in a partial pay or they were in a C&C and something happened, like they got a big workman's comp settlement. I had a guy once and I said, why they bring you out of C&C? He goes, "I think I know why." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I just got a big workman's comp settlement." And I said, "Well, that's what did it, because that was reported to the IRS. They see you got all this money. Now they think, even though we placed you in currently non-collectible status, they now think that you have the ability to pay them back." Well, guess what? He took that money. He bought a place along the river or a lake or something like that, fixed up this house, spent all this money, didn't have any money left. But of course, the IRS didn't know that. So he had to hire me again to prove to all this. So the fee was the same because we had to do as much work as the first time. And we got him placed back into currently non collectible status. But most of the time people get those big settlements and they just put it in a bank account. And the IRS knows about that. And so that's when, after, a lengthy point in time when the IRS is silent, when they come after you again.
Yeah. Lance, can you kind of explain for the audience out there, like the difference between a resumed collection case and how it just differs from like a standard IRS case that's been open and active all along?
Well, I don't know that there is a difference. The collection statute continues to run when you have an agreement with the IRS. It continues to run if they just leave you alone. There are certain actions you can take that will stop the running of the statute on collections, but I don't know that it's any different. I mean, like I said before, things just fall through the cracks. And, sometimes we get to run out the clock on collections because, the IRS just ignores the case. We had a guy in Nashville, owed $500,000, paid me $50,000. Then I found out, well, this guy's going to pay it all back. He made $500,000 a year. But they fell silent. We ran out well over $200,000, and then they caught up with him. but he still made 4.5 times on his investment with us. And so he was fine with paying the remainder because we had saved him a lot of money from paying back the IRS.
Lance, what mistakes, let's act preventative here. What mistakes have you seen people make in this renewed IRS collection that makes it a little harder to deal with? Is it changing the address or is it things like that? Like, how would you advise people to not make those mistakes if you are under a collection?
Well, you bring up a good point. Now, changing your address, the way they do that is if you don't file your returns, the IRS is only required by law to send notices to your last known address. And the way they update a change of address is when you file your tax returns. So guess what? Unless you send in a change of address form, and in all these years, 15,000 clients plus God knows how many initial consults, only one person do I know ever sent in a change of address form. You're not going to get the notice, and bad things can happen. So just because you move doesn't mean you're going to be out of the reaches of the IRS. So you need to make sure that you stay in contact with them so that you can respond if you get those nasty notices.
Stay in contact with them. It's the government. They know where you are, everybody. So, Lance, let me ask you as we put a bow on today's episode. So, someone out there is listening to this, they're watching this, they haven't heard from the IRS in a long time, like we mentioned. They're a little bit worried about what might happen next, given all of your words today. What would you want them to understand before they actually start reacting?
I want them to call us, and at a minimum, we have special software that goes into the IRS systems. It goes back to 1990, and we can see what's going on. And the other thing that we can see is whether or not the IRS is already in a position to levy. So we need to know all that so that we need to take some action to prevent all that. So just because you haven't heard from the IRS in a long time doesn't mean you're out of the woods. You need to take care of these problems, and that's a big deal, Mike, because my people get into this problem because they're procrastinators. And guess what? They hire us. We tell them we need this, this, and this. They don't give it to us. I tell them, don't hire us if you're not going to do what we ask you to do because you're wasting your money. You got to get this resolved. We can't do this on our own. It's a collaborative effort. I have certain responsibilities to you, and you have certain responsibilities to yourself. We just don't wave a magic wand and it goes away. We're in this together.
You got to get it resolved. It's in the title of this podcast, Lance. Lance, thank you so much for the time, the insights. I appreciate it as always.
Good to see you again, Mike.
Thank you to everyone out there for listening to this installment of Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury. Look, silence from the IRS doesn't always mean a case is over, as Lance explained, but renewed collection doesn't mean it's too late to act. So don't procrastinate. If the IRS activity has restarted, you want some guidance, do me a favor, visit lancedrurylaw.com. One more favor too before you go, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.